All right, so with this topic, we're going to go into the construction on both a theoretical and a practical level of cutscenes.
The cutscene is the single most important element of immersion.
Yes, especially from a cinematic standpoint. For a
cinematic standpoint, but it's also the hardest to insert.
Yes.
It's very difficult.
A cutscene can very easily turn into pure exposition and info dump, where instead of actually bringing the player into the game, you pull them right out by forcing them to watch a movie.
Yeah.
People don't want to watch a movie when they play a game. They want to play the game.
That's right.
That's why people were pulling their hair out at the end of Metal Gear Solid 4 with its 71-minute ending.
What the hell?
Yeah, from the moment you beat Liquid Ocelot to the moment the very, very, very last post-credit thing rolls is 71 minutes.
God.
Don't get me wrong.
Wow.
I love Metal Gear Solid 4. It's my second favorite. My favorite being Metal Gear Solid 3. And I loved how they wrapped up Solid Snake's story in a nice little bow. But holy crap, that's way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. So you don't want your game to be that. You know, it's not a bragging right to say that you're giving Hideo Kojima a run for his money.
No, actually, think of that as a badge of shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
So let's go into it. Let's dive into this thing called a cutscene.
Right. So by its very briefest definition, putting it into a box and tail, I want to kind of volley with this one back and forth.
Sure.
A cutscene is a moment in which the player loses interactivity, but the game still processes something in front of them. It can be either a literal cutscene where the camera cuts away to something else, and the player's viewing something the character is not seeing, and then it comes back to, as we like to call it, the unaware.
Right.
Or
it can be showing the player the result of something they did.
Right. In moving the story forward. The older Final Fantasy games, 7, 8, and 9, were famous for that, where they would show the full motion video cutscenes of something happening and what that did. Black Rose mentions the OG FF7 Aerith death cutscene. Yes, indeed. In fact, I
was also thinking. Go ahead.
What makes that one so powerful is not just Aerith dying, but the fact that it's the first time you actually see Sephiroth. They've been teasing Sephiroth the whole OG FF7 game in flashbacks, in talking about him, in seeing, President Shinra's dead body, in fighting Genova Birth, I think. It's been a while since I played the game, so I don't remember when you fight Genova Birth. But Sephiroth's been alluded to and seen in flashbacks. You've never actually seen the man. And then he shows up in this cutscene and kills one of the main cast. The emotion aside, it is actually a very powerful story tool because you see the transition between the light part of the story, which is Aerith bringing you all to, we're going to stop Sephiroth, to now Sephiroth is in control. And the story takes an exceedingly dark turn after that, and does not stop being dark until the very end. So, very good example there, Black Rose. Go ahead, honey.
I think that's a very good example of cutscene and use of cutscene. I think a cutscene also you can base information. You can instead of just a wall of text for info dumping, you can actually use a cutscene to establish some world lore.
Right.
Using these like at the very beginning of the game, like almost as a prologue. Think of Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Yes.
Elder Scrolls Oblivion is a great example of an opening cutscene.
Yes, and
of course the voice of Sir Patrick Stewart is amazing.
Because all it does, and it's not very long, it's like a minute, 30 seconds maybe. All it is Sir Patrick Stewart voicing Uriel Septim telling you what's going on. It shows the Daedric Siege engine. It shows, you know, the horrors that he has seen. And then he comes up with the line, this is the end of the Fourth Era and the final days of my life. Boom, Oblivion. And then you slide into the prison. So it's a powerful opening, and it's a cutscene, and it conveys information without actually saying anything. It sets up the game. And what Roxy says, yes, the cutscene at the beginning of the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man, where it seamlessly goes from the cutscene right into the gameplay. There's no tutorial. There's no press it. You are literally Peter Parker gets in a Spidey costume, jumps out the window, and boom, you're playing the game. So,
that's right.
Chef's kiss. But let's go back to the cutscenes, because we're not talking about the gameplay. Cutscenes provide information, storytelling, they offer foreshadowing, they're the payoff for foreshadowing. A cutscene is a necessary part of, well, I don't want to say necessary, because you can have a game without any cutscenes at all. The Half-Life series doesn't have cutscenes. It has cinematics, but you are constantly in control of Gordon Freeman or Alex. So those aren't cutscenes. A cutscene is when the player has no control. All they can do is watch. And Rack mentioned a QTE event. All jokes aside, if it's a QTE, it's not a cutscene. You know, Azora's Wrath is a great example of that. Azora's Wrath uses actual cutscenes and then uses a QTE to transition from cutscene to gameplay. Like, for example, when you're fighting the final boss, Buddha God, and, you know, you have the event where he's talking to you and he releases your daughter and you're holding his daughter, you know, Azora's holding his daughter, and, you know, the god reaches out and says, you will be my successor, and holds out his hand, and the gameplay is continuing. I mean, the cutscene's continuing. There's no interactivity, and then on the screen it says, extend your hand. And as soon as the player presses that button, they punch God in the face, and that starts the final battle. So that is a beautiful example of a cutscene that then uses a QTE or some input to transition into gameplay. So
yeah, and so that leads me to my point of use of cutscenes. Keep it short.
Yes.
You know, it's kind of variation of KISS. Keep it short, stupid. You know, it's as I lose my hands. It's you don't want to take the player out of the game for too long.
No, you really don't.
They'll lose the flow. They'll lose their immersion experience. A cutscene should just be long enough to establish something, and then boom, get the player right back into it. And the games that you mentioned before, Spider-Man and the rest of them, they do a really good job of that.
They do a very good job. Well, games like Metal Gear Solid, while the stories are amazing, that's a terrible use of cutscenes. They're just
that's an example of a bad cutscene.
And the only reason that Hideo Kojima gets along, let me try again. The only reason Hideo Kojima is allowed to do that is because he's Hideo Kojima.
That's
just because you're famous doesn't mean the thing you do is any good. We have here, I kind of scroll down a little bit, and what I have here is where they talk about conversational cutscenes. And that's a good thing that you all can use. Have conversation happen, because conversation, if it's well written and well paced, can exchange information back and forth very quickly. You know, like when Teal and I start bantering and we get a good rhythm going, we're throwing out both personality, you learn about us, but we're also throwing out information.
Yeah. Dragon Quest XI did that
very well,
quite often.
Yes,
and very well.
Yes,
having these small cutscenes of characters talking back and forth with each other. Sometimes it was good guys, sometimes it was bad guys.
And the one or two times it slows down, it does it in a way that draws a lot of attention, like finding out that the Luminary is a prince and that Rab is his grandfather. That was a big thing. It slows down just enough so that you can say there is emotion here. This is your living relative. This person has suffered a lot because they watched your father and mother die. Spoiler alert. Not really, but kind of.
Spoiler. Kind of, sort of.
But then some of the later cutscenes, most of them are a lot faster. They're a lot more faster. So as Teal said, keep it simple. Just use the KISS method. Then you have your info dumps. I mean, a cutscene can be used for an info dump. You know.
Yeah, the best cutscenes I think for that are at the beginning of
Hmm.
games.
Hmm.
Um, of course, you can go to the extreme and take it too long, like Xenosaga's opening.
Xenosaga's opening is infamous as the wrong way to do an info dump. Now, the very, 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 very beginning, where you are looking at Earth during our time, and it's an Egyptian dig, and Dr. Mizrahi finds the Zohar. That's fine. That actually gives you a lot of information to infer, you know.
And if they'd stopped right there, that would have been great.
But then you get
But it kept
15 minutes of Cosmos booting up.
Oh, God.
I love Cosmos, but I did not need to see 15 minutes of her going through a DOS check.
Yeah.
Just didn't need it. Didn't need it.
Yeah.
You can also use them to set your setting. We talked about that. In fact, Xenosaga is a good example of how not to set your game, while Oblivion's a good way to set your game.
Mm-hmm.
And also the rewards, as you mentioned. So,
yes, having a cutscene as a reward.
Yeah, and they don't have to be a positive reward. They could be a negative thing that happens, but it's a reward in player progression, story progression. Like, for example, when Kuja trances in Final Fantasy IX, he hits Ultima, he then like, I now have this trance power, haha, and then Garland's like, yeah, guess what, you're gonna die anyway. And then Kuja loses his mind, and then it goes to a cutscene of him blowing Terra up with his powers. That is a reward. Now, but it's not a reward. Terra blew up. Well, it's a reward for the player. It's a fulfillment of seeing this bad guy finally unleash his power and establishing himself as the main primary antagonist you have to defeat to save the world. Necron not included.
Necron not included. Another example of a cutscene that is just pure satisfying reward is in Final Fantasy X. When you have done all the different things in the game to unlock an extra scene featuring Titus and Yuna.
Yeah, it's worth it. You bust your butt off to get I think it's the good ending, or the better, the almost perfect ending.
Better ending. Yeah, the almost perfect ending, right.
But you bust your butt off. You go through a lot. But that cutscene at the end where Titus is rebirthed, and this is 10-2, I think you're talking about, right?
This 10-2, yeah.
Titus is rebirthed by the Faith. He swims up, he pops out, and there's the cast of Final Fantasy X. And he swims up to Yuna, she's running into the water, they meet, they kiss, they hold on to each other, and they're back. It's the impossibility of the dream being returned to existence to be with the woman he loves. Happens.
Yeah.
She did it. That's the payoff. So, yeah. Now to catch up a little bit on chat for a moment before we wrap this up, Burke is talking like Dark Souls with maybe 2 cutscenes, like the starting and the ending, right, where like the Hollow One is given the key, and then at the end when he defeats the Crimson Lord and lights the pyre. I mean, that's it. Your games don't have to have cutscenes. Not at all. Not at all.
No, and I think and a good example of that is in Skyrim. Okay, you walk into Windhelm, into the castle of King Ulfric. Ulfric. And he's having a conversation with his general, with his number 2. And while their conversation's going on, you can move around, pick up stuff and run around and shoot a fireball at a wall, and but the conversation is going on, and you can choose to listen in and hear the information they're saying, or you can choose to just blow them off.
You could technically interrupt the conversation with Ulfric and his general. It'll break the script because Bethesda, but you can technically interrupt the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's not a cutscene. That's an example like what Burke was saying with Dark Souls and what Teal's saying, where they don't use cutscenes. Skyrim has 1 cutscene, the opening of the game.
Just the opening.
Even when you destroy Alduin and you're getting cheered by the people of Sovngarde, or when you go back to the throat of the world and Parthenak belches at you for 5 minutes, that's technically not a cutscene.
Correct.
Because you have control.
The cutscenes at the beginning of the game.
Yeah. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think you can attack Parthenax. I don't know if you can kill him. I don't remember if he's made immortal if you kill Alduin. And I don't think you should.
I'm not sure.
But but you can still move around, so it's not a cutscene. You know.
And that is a key difference right there. Cutscene, you cannot move around. You cannot. You're stuck. You watch it. That's all you do. You're watching. You do nothing else. If you can move around and do something, interrupt it, that's not a cutscene.
Right. And that is why.
Because I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and tie a nice big bow on it.
And that is why the Half-Life games are lauded for being so great. They achieve a masterful level of storytelling without a single cutscene.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, to kind of like Gil said, to kind of wrap this up, if your game is going to utilize parts where there's no player input and they're just watching, you're using a cutscene, and it's up to you as the developer to make sure that it's done properly in a way that's engaging without breaking immersion.
There you go.
So, if you like what you saw, lay a smack down the like button below, subscribe to our channel, consider supporting us on Patreon, connect with us over Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you next time.